I would argue that a lot of the same things that are passing the ethical test when it comes to the way that we treat the public and the way that we treat those men and women that are working inside the agency, those also happen to be things that are best practices from a legal liability standpoint. It really has just been in the last couple of years that I've been spending more time on reviewing and more actively engaging in assisting leaders in law enforcement with their policies and procedures. And I really prefer that to a lot of other routes through which we see policies and procedures changing. If I can be very frank, let's face it, a lot of times it comes out of a lawsuit. So you have attorneys and you have expert witnesses and folks that are on the plaintiff side of suing a police department, suing a sheriff's office, and sadly, it's all too often, it seems to me, only after a painful, time-consuming, and costly, in every sense of the word, costly lawsuit that we see law enforcement leaders really prioritizing the creation and the revision of policies for their agency. And so I commend you. I'm preaching to the choir here. You're the ones that have taken time out of your schedule to listen to this attorney talk about this. But I have to tell you that I'm very fortunate to have a chance to do that. And the reason that I am and actively engaged in this and that I'm excited here in the new year of 2026 and moving forward about doing more on this side of it is because I would much rather be active in what I'm doing, which is to say an external review of policies, conducting trainings about policies, how to create, how to revise, learning from case studies. I'd much rather do that than see folks learn the lesson through a lawsuit. So that's really the goal here, is to internally conduct an audit, if you will, of our high priority, or what should be high priority policies. Are they matching our practices? What needs to be revised? What needs to be reset? And to whatever extent I can help externally to help you in doing that. So creating and revising policies for law enforcement, knowing, and hopefully this is all fairly described in our webinar description, that it's yes about creating the policies and procedures, but also very closely related to that is making sure that the practices, that the day in, day out practices are matching those policies, matching those rules of engagement that we're giving the men and women inside of an agency. I know it sounds painfully boring when I say that I'm excited about policy review. I'm excited about doing an IA policy review, a pursuits policy review. The reason that I'm excited about it's not just because I love the smell of fresh policy in the morning and I'm a nerdy attorney, although that may be fair enough. But when it's done the right way, it's supposed to be rules of engagement. And I think that it's fair to say that now getting close to, it's hard to believe, getting close to 6 years from the summer of 2020, that was a real point in time where it became painfully apparent how many agencies were not giving clear rules of engagement to the men and women dealing with, in 2020, civil unrest certainly, and we see that occurring in different parts of the country on a fairly regular basis. But in many other areas like police pursuits and areas of proactive policing, you have these situations where men and women inside of a department genuinely don't know what they're supposed to err on the side of, genuinely don't know what the rules of engagement are. And that's a real problem. It's a liability problem, but it's also a morale problem. It's a serious morale problem. It's a leadership problem when we have men and women that don't know what their rules of engagement are. So if I can put it this way, it's the rules of engagement part that I'm interested in. Policies and procedures are supposed to make it, if I can really put a fine point on it, we got a 22, 23-year-old young person who's only been in law enforcement for a year or two, barely off of probationary status, barely in their own squad car, and they've got to make decisions tonight that could very much impact their career, could impact their livelihood, and could have dire consequences for the people that they work with and for the public that they work for. And as a result of that, it's critically important that we give them as clear rules of engagement as possible. That's what policies and procedures are supposed to be. Somewhere along the way, like so many other things, a lot of folks have lost sight of that. And the goal of policies and procedures is that we all sign off on it once a year. And somewhere along the way, the idea of policies and procedures seems to have become that the longer it takes to download the PDF of the policy manual, that must mean it's a better policy manual. I would actually take the opposite approach. Don't get me wrong, sometimes the policy manual may be much denser than your average beat cop would care for it to be. I understand that. But I do think that in some cases we make a mistake of thinking, well, we're just going to add more and more policies on to the point where comprehension is nearly impossible, where we're not prioritizing those things that are higher frequency, those things that are higher severity. And so we need to be looking at giving clear rules of engagement, getting back at why we have policies and procedures in the first place. Direction and guidance of officer actions. Again, clear rules of engagement.